Hey guys, welcome back to the Uncommodified podcast and to another UNCORK Conversation. Today my guest is Cam Shapansky. Cam, thanks for joining me on the show.
Great to be here. Yeah, thanks, Tim.
Awesome. So this is going to be an exciting conversation for me because, I don't know, social media is an awesome thing, but I've been reconnecting with people throughout my life. And Cam and I recently reconnected after, 25, 30 years. We'll figure that out eventually and do the math. But after a long time, and found out that although we had been friends as teenagers and had some connection and our lives go separate ways, but yet we have some similarity in our pathways. And that's part of the conversation we want to explore today. So Cam and I are going to get into this idea of things that we've learned through a series of events in our lives that have allowed us the privilege of working cross-culturally or internationally for a long time. What we've learned when we've gone to other cultures, what we've learned from those people there, what that has taught us about life and leadership, about our assumptions, and ultimately what it's taught us about how to live and to lead ourselves and others through the process. So let me just give you a little bit of Cam's background, and then we'll tuck into the conversation. So Cam leads a team of world changers, and I'm sure he's going to explain a little bit about what does that really mean for him. That's really on a mission to help people think differently about social engagement, how they engage with communities and societies around them. And as a communicator, Cam is a phenomenal communicator, tremendous business background, bought and sold businesses, lots of different things going on for Cam over the years. But as a communicator and an advocate in the social sector, fundraising and program development, Cam has led change management and strategic planning initiatives around the globe with large nonprofit organizations on 6 continents and in dozens of countries around the world. He's a visionary, he's a thought leader, and at the end of the day, he's just a friend that I'm reconnecting with and grabbing some new passion from at this moment in my life, which is always the great part of the journey. Cam started his work internationally on the program side and spent a number of years in the Middle East and has a deep passion for fundraising and connecting supporters with the work that's being done and how that works, because money is an important part of the engine that makes all that happen. And then in the midst of that, Cam founded an organization called Blue North. I believe it's bluenorth.ca, isn't it, the website?
That's right, yep.
Yeah, Blue North. And that organization that Cam leads, he's a CEO, works with nonprofit organizations around the world, helping them improve their programs, helping them raise money, and do more of the great work that they want to do, the passion that they have. And so that's the conversation we want to explore, what all this international work, and as you know, listening to my podcast, I've done some myself over the years, not as robustly as Cam, but there's lessons that we've learned along the way that we would not have learned without that experience, and that's what we want to touch into today. But of course, every great conversation, every great UNCORK conversation for me, Cam, begins with a drink, sometimes a glass of water, but not tonight, my friend. What are we drinking?
It's tequila night, Tim.
It's tequila night. I like tequila night. I have the Mezcal. I have an artisan Mezcal that my daughter bought me for my birthday. You got the tequila. I got some white lightning. If you're on the YouTube channel, you can see that's awful clear. So this could be a good conversation, Cam.
Looking forward to it. And just so you know, 2 times ago when I would have been with Tim, he had a big brown curly afro. So you can imagine how long ago that was.
It's been a while. Yeah, our hair has receded, but our wisdom has grown over the years.
To make fun, right?
That's so funny. I was going to pull a picture out, actually. I was kind of funny in the prep for the podcast. I thought I should try to find an old picture of myself and say, hey, this is the Tim that Cam knew. Both of us had hair, and we probably thought we knew it all because we were young. When you're young, you know it all. And then I heard somebody say one time, Cam, wisdom is what you learn after you know it all. So
Exactly.
Maybe we got some wisdom. So listen, let's tuck into this conversation. So you have had the privilege of working around the globe, and we can get into some of the nuances and experiences you've had. But when you think of this, something you've learned about leading and about being human and about interacting with people that you wouldn't have learned if you didn't have these experiences, Cam. When I ask you that question that way, what's one of the things that comes to your mind and why?
Oh, wow. Okay. In North America, the West, we tend to equate money with happiness. Some of the happiest people, the best conversations, the biggest laughs I've had in my life have happened on the dirt floor of a grass hut in the middle of a field, where time is not money. Time is something that you spend in good conversations with great people, and and there's no clock, right? And so I think that's probably the biggest learning, that comes to mind.
Interesting, for sure. Happy. I would say I reflect on the same thing. I met some people. I think contentment comes to mind when I think of it. Even in the midst of difficulty and everything, and even in the midst of poverty, there is a deep contentment. It's kind of funny you say something about time. A friend of mine who in Africa says, I think he says something like this: Africans have time, Americans have watches. So he says something,
exactly.
something like that, right? So,
right.
Absolutely. There's this quality of life that we discover, and so when you look at these complex environments where people are leading and making and moving their organizations forward for the causes that they're involved in, what other things come to mind, and things that, from a leadership perspective, that you encountered in them that has really been instructive for you over the years?
Yeah, I think probably more than anything is the ability and the requirement to listen first, right? We often go into situations feeling like we need to have the answers right out of the gate, and we need to be smart right out of the gate. You talk too fast and you look stupid, right? Especially when you're in some of these other, in contexts that you're not used to, right? You need to observe, listen, ask questions that get answers that you're not allowed to ask for, and listen for wisdom that's you're not really hearing, but you're inferring through the way it's being delivered, right? Like, I'm not sure if that makes sense, but I remember going to a meeting in Japan, and I was the woman who met me at the door said, "Cam, no matter what you say, we're going to smile and nod and be very gracious, but that doesn't necessarily mean we're agreeing with you." I think leaders often feel like they need to be heard, the biggest voice in the room, the boldest voice in the room. Big and bold often comes from quiet listening and sort of insights that way, I think. Yeah.
No, it's interesting. And I think tonight in the conversation, as you guys listen in, I think Cam and I are going to find a lot of dots that connect. And again, just to be really transparent, sometimes when I'm preparing for a conversation like this, sometimes I have a series of questions that I prepare in advance, and I send my guest, and we sort of explore the conversation around that. Cam and I decided tonight that we weren't going to do that. We're going to do this a little differently, and that we're just going to find that organic conversation and find where the connective tissues are for us in the conversation. And as we do that, hopefully you'll find some connective tissue. You may not have had some of the experiences that we've had internationally, but look how these dots connect to you for where you are, because there's cultural nuance even in Canada. There's cultural nuance in your community. There's cultural nuance all around you. And again, we need to be students of the cultures that we're in. And when you talk about listening for that wisdom, I think about an experience, Cam, that I had when we partnered with a group of nurses at one point in the work that I was doing in Mozambique. These people were from another planet, actually. It was a physician assistant nurses. They rode horseback through the Mozambican jungles, bringing medical care, killing snakes with machetes, sleeping in tents. They were from another planet. And I remember when we first started working with them and going over and partnering with them, I had the privilege one time sitting under this huge, beautiful tree in this grove with some village elders and one of the key people there that had a vision to start a school. And I remember sitting there on a log and just listening to the conversation through an interpreter and listening, thinking I was going there sort of to give them my wisdom on how this could work, how we could make this happen for them. And I very quickly realized that I was the dumbest man on the stump. There was a lot of wisdom under that tree. And man, the more I listened, the smarter I became. The more I listened, the wiser I became. And eventually that put us in a position to actually begin to fund a series of schools that this particular young woman built, all for the sake of that community. But man, did I learn a lot of wisdom sitting on that stump, my friend.
Yeah, that's right. I think like the other thing that we can be quick to judge, right? Like we can hear something and respond to it really, really quickly. But if you force yourself to stop, take it in, understand the context, and this applies in Canada and the U.S. as much as it applies in Africa and Asia, right? Like if you understand the context and slow down, there's your mind will change. I remember sitting in in rural Kenya with a grandmother, and when you're having some of these conversations, you need to kind of take a clinical kind of approach, because the reality is just so harsh that if you allow yourself to get into it, you're just going to be a blubbering idiot, right? Because it's just so sad and difficult. And so I remember having this conversation, and this woman sat and told me how her 2 daughters had died. Her granddaughter had just discovered her granddaughter had AIDS, and her sons were gone, and she was going on like this. And I was kind of asking questions and probing more. And somebody tapped me on the shoulder. He was actually a cameraman who was filming this when he was with me. He tapped me on the shoulder as we walked away, and he said, "It hurts her just as much as it would hurt your mom, you know."
Hmm.
And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, if your mom lost her 2 daughters and just found out that her granddaughter was dying and her sons were gone, how would that affect her? It's no different here."
Mm.
Right? And it's I think sometimes we can kind of throw baggage on another context, because we think, oh, people are always dying here, it doesn't really matter, and I say, that sounds horrible to say that, I don't mean that, but
Correct.
we can almost do that without even knowing it. And so we need to slow down and appreciate the context.
No, and I think that's so true. And I remember situations similar that you're describing where, you recognize that there is a whole other layer of life that's happening in front of you. I mean, the veil between life and death is so thin, obviously, in so many of the countries that you work in, that I've done some work in. We are so insulated from disease in Canada, insulated from death. We do such a great job with our healthcare system to bring health, but at the same time we're so insulated. And you go to a country where this is an everyday occurrence, where you can't run away and hide from it. And it is easy to believe that somehow they're not affected in the same way. That this because they deal with it all the time, that somehow they've developed another sense that it makes them anemic to this pain, which is just so untrue. And I remember those same situations where you would sit with people and recognize. I remember thinking to myself, what if these were my kids? Right. Exactly. Where people, maybe we were in a context and maybe people, for instance, would steal or something to feed their family, and then we get all, as you said, judgmental. I would never do that. You know what? I would do that. I would do it in a heartbeat. I think if I was in that situation. And it's so easy to take this moral high ground of judgment that you think somehow you're superior because your life circumstances have allowed you an insulation from these things. Yeah.
But I'm sitting in a hut in Kenya saying that. If I'm sitting in a boardroom in Toronto, it's read the room before you talk too much. Right. It's kind of, you got to know who you're talking to and be very, very aware of their reactions.
No, for sure. No, it's exactly the same. I guess that's the thing, is at the end of the day we're dealing with humans. The situations are different, exactly. but the lessons become important. And maybe can you speak a little bit about your experience in being in places where English, your native tongue, isn't the natural language, and how that changes the dynamic for communication, but also the impact on you when you're in a place where you're not understanding all the nuances of communication. I mean, that obviously is a challenge as you work internationally.
Yeah, I mean, we are fortunate in that our mother tongue is the second language for most of the world, and so it's becoming increasingly challenging to go to a context where there is no English, right? Like any other language you speak, you're going to run into that, but English, you're pretty good. I do think that in other contexts, my habit is always to do as much research as possible going in, learn a few words, show some appreciation for that, and build a really good rapport with your translator. And make sure that your translator is not just translating what you're saying. I've always, whenever I'm working with a translator, I always say, look, I'm not going to stop after every sentence. I'm going to explain a concept, and then I want you to contextualize that for me and turn that into something that means something in your in your environment.
Yeah. You know, and as you talk about it, and I've had the same experience working with translators. I worked one time in Guatemala. I was doing some training there, and I had a Spanish translator who was a UN translator, and everyone had headsets in the room.
Yeah,
I happened to be in an environment, and she was translating, and she was so nuanced. I don't say a very often, but every once in a while when I said a, she would translate, and so you see. So her nuance of translation was so powerful. But, you know, when you talk about that, what I think about, and you just made the comment about North America and there, is that, you know, maybe if we thought in the boardroom, maybe if we thought we were in Africa, maybe we would be better communicators. Because the reality is you slow down, you listen, apparently, to what you just said. You speak their language. Oh, my gosh. And what if we actually did that more in our corporate worlds where we slowed down, we listened, and we spoke the language actually of the people we were trying to communicate? Oh, my God, we'd be better communicators. Wouldn't it be amazing?
So, like, you go to the Middle East, and in the Middle East, if you show the bottom of your shoe to somebody, that is kind of equal to calling them an ass.
Yep.
Right? And so how many times, we probably don't even realize it, do you sit in a meeting and you throw your foot up on your knee when you're sitting in a chair, you know, and just and keep carrying on. Well, in the Middle East, you do that. You're showing them the bottom of your shoe and you're calling them an ass when you're in the meeting. How difficult is it to have a meaningful conversation to somebody when you're sitting there the entire time calling them an ass? And I do believe, to your point, Tim, that there are, you look at the U.S., you look at West Coast U.S. versus East Coast U.S., it's a different dress code. It's a different way of interacting. It's a different, you know, on the West Coast of the U.S., people say, what do you do? And you say, oh, I like to surf and run and whatever. And the East Coast, you know, what do you do? Well, I'm a banker, right? And
right.
So it's the same thing in, you know, in this context.
Yeah, no, for sure. So listen, if you're listening in, we're chatting about experiences that we've had in other cultures. And again, I think the application point that Cam just made is really true. And that is that these things hold true in our communication as leaders, as people in this culture. You know, how do we speak the language of the people that we're in front of? How do we honor them? How do we subtly dishonor them and we don't even know it? What is it that we need to become more attuned to? I mean, these are fascinating conversations for sure in relationship to this. So when you look at just your own personal learning, Cam, I mean, you've been on this journey. When did you first work internationally? You and your wife went originally, right, to work internationally in Egypt. Is that correct?
Yeah, we worked in the Middle East,
okay.
And that was in the late 1980s.
Okay, in the late 80s.
And I worked on the program side of the international development community for a number of years. And that in many ways that was kind of because international organizations need to be able to speak to each other. And so the one thing I've been able to do, and I think part of my working abroad has helped with that, is, you know, when I'm in the heart of Africa, I'm trying to help them understand, look, this is how North Americans think about these things.
Right.
And this is the way you need to communicate to them. And then I do the same thing back in North America. I say, look, these are your field partners, and this is their world. This is what they're dealing with, and trying to sort of shorten that bridge.
Okay.
Interesting story. I remember, this is years and years ago. My dad came to visit us when we were in Egypt, and my dad was fascinated by just a lot of the difficulty in the country. And so one day we're walking down the road, and he sees a big garbage dump with fires and donkeys and, you know, people picking through the garbage to see if they can salvage things or whatever. And so my dad ran up on this garbage dump and started taking pictures of people rifling through the garbage and all of these sorts of things, because he found that very, very fascinating from his point of view. An elderly Egyptian man walked over to me, grabbed me by the shoulder, pulled me aside. He said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Look it. We've got the pyramids, we've got the Nile, we've got beauty, we've got history, we've got all of this stuff that he could be taking pictures of, and you brought him halfway around the world to take pictures of a garbage dump? What are you thinking?" You know, and that's, you know, that really struck a chord. It stuck with me to this day, right? Like, I mean, everybody is proud of their own country, and they want people who visit it to see the best of what they got. They don't want them taking pictures of garbage dumps.
No, no, it's so true. And even you think about how people dress when they meet you, and even when they have nothing, they come out. I remember being in villages in Mozambique, and we would be there, and obviously people would bring out the best for us. And frankly, the best for us was not wonderful for us at times. And I remember the first time I was in a situation where I was given some meat that I did not want to eat, and that I wasn't quite sure of its origin of species. And I remember how deeply challenged I was. And the person I was with had warned me. He said, look, you, in this case, he said, you need to eat anything they give you, and you need to be really, really happy about it, because they are giving you what they never get. And man, I learned a lot about honor. What does honor look like? I didn't grow up in a family where we really understood honor and all that kind of stuff. I mean, I grew up on the wrong side of the tracks where I came from, and this idea of honoring people and this wasn't native to my psyche. But I think one of the things I learned over the years is just how we can dishonor and honor people, how we can dishonor people so quickly, how we can honor them in little ways, and what that does, particularly in an honor culture, where when you provide that honor, there is something transformative that happens in the relationship. And again, I think that's a transferable skill. How do we honor the people that we connect with, we work with, whether it's a server we meet in a restaurant or whether it's somebody that works for us in our corporation? What does bestowing honor on another individual really look like, and how transformative in and of itself that act can be?
And I think, I couldn't agree more. And I think bestowing honor starts with reserving judgment. Like we look today at the political spectrum and different political views, or pandemic, should you wear a mask or not, or should you, these sorts of things become instant kind of issues of polarization. And honor means, hold on a second, before I put my hat on that person and tell them how they should be thinking, let me slow back and reverse a little bit and try to see things from their perspective, right? Like I think that is, as I've worked internationally, that's I'll keep referring to that, but it's you gotta bite your tongue, you gotta listen, you gotta try to understand, why are you coming from that perspective. I remember a flight I took to L.A. and this isn't even global, but in L.A. from Toronto. And I was on a flight, and I sat beside a guy who couldn't be more politically different than me. And I won't get into what that means, but he just absolute opposite end of the spectrum. And for me, that became about not, oh, what an idiot. It became about, okay, this guy seems like he's fairly intelligent. Try to understand why and where he's coming from in this whole thing. And we've normally I put the headphones on and whatever on a flight, but we talked for the full 4 hours, and I'm not. I didn't convince him. He didn't convince me. But we left the flight kind of saying, okay, at least I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah. And again, I go back to what you just said. You bestow honor by reserving judgment or not judging. That's a really powerful statement that you made. And again, if you're listening, just think about that for a second. We're in a time of polarization, even as Cam just said, whether it's politically or socially or around healthcare things or whatever it is that you want to polarize around it, the myriad things. This is not helpful human behavior. And ultimately, we are the same. At our core and our essence, we're the same. Whether you're this side of the spectrum of poverty or wealth, whether you're this side of the spectrum of politics or any other issue, we're deeply connected and deeply the same. And so you're challenging me to think about that, and I would challenge you as our listeners to think about that. Where in your life do you need to honor people more by reserving judgment, by removing judgment from a situation that may be helpful to you? That's a really powerful thought, Cam. I really appreciate that. So again, going back to some of the experiences that you've had, and so where did you get? I mean, you end up in Egypt, and you're in the 80s. I imagine you just didn't decide one day I'm going to go to Egypt. So my question is, this life you have now and the world that you have gone into for the last all your life now, really, did it just find you? Did you find it? Did it hunt you down and make you do it? Like, I'm always interested in the journey that calls somebody to a sense of destiny, because clearly in talking to you and having lunch the other day, you clearly are operating in the center, I think, of what you must have been made to do. How do you find yourself there?
Yeah, that's a good question. Like when I first found out about this podcast, Uncommodified, that's kind of, I think, that really rung true with me, right? Like I think in this world and the work that we're doing, I have always tried to, rely on my instincts with business, not try to make a ton of money, not try to set the world on fire, but just kind of do the right thing in the work that we're doing, and I've got a passion to help people, and so I've always kind of called myself a bit of an accidental entrepreneur. A lot of entrepreneur friends of mine are people who want to frickin' set the world on fire and make $1 billion and change the way. That's never been my motivation. I kind of always had this sort of messianic complex, I guess, where I think there's a better way of doing things, and we can be more effective in the way we think about things, and organizations can do things better. And I've just kind of pursued that path. It sounds a little bit, maybe it sounds a little hokey, but that's where I've come from on my journey, and it's led me into all kinds of organizations and people of passion, right? Like in the world that I work in, is a lot of, in the social sector, it's a lot of people that aren't business people, but they care. They are people of purpose and passion, and they want to make the world a better place. They don't have the tools to do it. And so a lot of what I've done is kind of help to provide those tools to bring that passion to help it kind of explode a little bit more than it has been for them.
Wow. No, that is a powerful journey, and again, whether you apply it to business or whether you apply it to life. I mean, I talk a lot about passion on this podcast because I really believe it's that energy, it's that catalyst, it's the thing that fuels people. And sometimes your passion pays, and sometimes it doesn't. Obviously, you work among a lot of people where their passion doesn't pay them well to discharge it, but yet they feel custodially responsible for this thing that they've got on them or in them, or however we describe it. What a privilege to come alongside these individuals, Cam, that you've had over the years, to come and to help them provide some structure and breathe some process, and then catalyze a message so they can communicate this passion to others, so people can ultimately put their hand and partner with them in these things. And again, I don't know a lot exactly how it all works for you, but I get the sense that part of this is you are a connector of people, and your organization clearly connects people of passion with people of means, and people with passion who can share a passion and ultimately catalyze people around this cause. I mean, tell us a story from your perspective of give me this example of what this really looks like in your real world. Like when you find a cause and a person who has it, and then you can connect a group of people, whether they're in North America or somewhere else. I mean, what does this ultimately look like, and how does that feel at the end of the day?
Okay, so I work for a large global organization that was heavily committed to taking a bite out of AIDS, HIV and AIDS, right? This was something that they were focused on. And so I spent a bunch of time with various countries around the world who are both raising money to fight HIV and AIDS, and on the ground with people who are fighting it firsthand. And let me tell you, as I was spent more time on the ground, and I talked to people who were heavily involved in this kind of battle, they talked about the very real possibility that HIV and AIDS would become airborne. Like that was, I mean, as it was evolving, and so they were sort of saying, we got to get ahead of this because this thing is evolving quicker than us, and we need to move ahead with that. And so all of that is to say, This is a global organization, and I got to a field, a program level in Uganda, and Uganda says, look, I got 14 different countries raising money for my programs, and every one of them is doing different things and needing me to provide different pieces of information and material and reports in order to help them raise money. I've got to a point where we can't fight HIV and AIDS on the ground in Uganda because I'm spending all my time fulfilling the needs of the people who are sending us money.
Interesting.
So what it looks like for me, I walk into that situation and say, okay, let's get these 14 countries together on the ground in Uganda, which we did, in Kampala, just out, or in Entebbe, actually, where the airport is. We sat there for 2 weeks, and I told this group, you're not leaving till we come to a common set of requirements so that this, and by the way, we're going to visit, this is ground zero. This is where HIV and AIDS started. We're going to go around and we're going to visit various communities and see what they're doing. And we're going to build a more efficient model for fighting this situation. And so we spent 2 weeks on the ground, and at the end of the 2 weeks, we had everybody sign an agreement, including the people on the ground and the people raising money, to sort of say we have a common set of requirements that's extremely efficient, that's going to raise more money, provide better products, and do more good in the world. And so, like, I don't know if that helps with your question, but that's an example of the kind of work that we do.
Okay, so you bring these people together, you catalyze process. You take that passion, which ultimately, at the end of the day, that passion is hard to channel. It's got to be like a raging river. It's got to be channeled into some process that makes sense that you can connect people with. And you raise a good point, because the reality is, I think a lot of people don't realize this. Having started a small boutique charity myself with some people, and I'm a trustee of, there's complications in relationship to what has to happen, and then the reporting structure that has to happen. Because of course, in Canada, anyways, this isn't true all around the world. Right. My listeners are, but in Canada, people receive a financial benefit, a tax receipt for that gift, and of course, there's a custodial responsibility on us as a charity to make sure that those funds are discharged for the purposes to which they were raised. And of course, we have reporting responsibility to the partners that we have. And so I can see this in a very small, we do this on a very small scale, and so it's quite simple in some ways. But you know what? You just raised a point that I never thought about. I'm one of probably a lot of people that are possibly raising funds and helping out these people that we might help out around the world. But we put a subset of responsibilities on them, custodial responsibilities of reporting and documentation that we need. I never thought about the fact that they're getting requests from everybody, and they're all different. I never really thought about that, Cam. So
when we lived in Egypt, we were doing program work, but we were constantly hosting donors who were coming and treating the people we were working with like zoo animals, right? Taking pictures of them, and so so every time these donors came to visit us in the field, it set our work back, because we were sorry about that. We they just wanted your picture, but and so it's it's challenging.
No, it is, and balancing all of that, and for sure. So obviously, communication is a big part of what you are managing, and that you're trying to broker between the partners that you're understanding. So when you look at just the art of communication, you talked about listening well, you talked about withholding judgment, you talked about speaking their language. All these things that you've talked about. Is there anything else, just from a raw communication perspective, that you've sort of learned? Because you're a great communicator. That's one thing that's very clear to me. So, and it's something that you obviously you're connecting people. So from a communication perspective, are there any other sort of lessons that you've learned that have helped you over the years be a more articulate communicator in the world that you're working in? Because so much of it seems like about brokering the ability of humans to connect and communicate and then catalyze around a cause. It seems like that's germane to what you do, obviously.
Yeah, I think the big one that comes to mind is simplicity. Right? I think so often we want to, I call it kind of outside in communication rather than inside out.
Okay.
Inside out is when we as an organization want to convey the complexity and intricacy of what it is we do and how we do it and how we're set up and how our process works to the people who support what we do or buy what we do if you're not in the charitable sector, right? Whereas I tend to say, okay, hold on a second, that's great, good for you, you're smart, it's complex, you're doing a lot of really hard stuff, but let's go outside in, right? What does the audience care about? And it's not how you're structured. It's not about the what and the how. It's about the who and the why, right? Like, I mean, don't tell me what you do and how you do it. That's you care about that, but nobody else does. Why do you do it, and who is benefiting? Right? Those are the messages that we need to deliver, and that's really, really hard. I've often said the hardest job you can ever do for an organization is to create a 3-panel brochure. Not because designing it and whatever, laying it out is difficult. No, I mean, that's easy. But to boil down the essence of an organization into a concise little pamphlet, that's really, really hard. That's taking a complex message, getting outside in, and making it simple.
No, that's very true. And I think it's brilliant what you just said. So if I understood correctly, so you're saying that we often are trying to communicate inside to outside. You're saying we got to re-engineer that process, and primarily, if I'm getting it, the message that people need to understand and hear is the why and the who. That's what ultimately, I suppose, I mean, I hate to use a transactional term, but that, I mean, we use it in communication. I guess that's what gets people to buy in at some level, understanding those two things. And if we simplify our message and become more concise around that, we'd have a greater uptake in communication, which ultimately would allow a subset of people to hear the message and respond with greater clarity and conviction. I mean, that's I think the process you're describing.
That's it. And like, we're all, whether we know it or like it or not, we're all obsessed with letting everybody know how flippin' smart we are, right? Forget about that, right? Like, don't justify your own existence. Really, really, really focus on your audience. That's the key.
Yeah, no, and so I'm hearing from Cam. Cam's telling me, Tim, you're not so smart. Actually, that's a good. And for your listening, guess what? You're not. People don't care how smart you are. They care that you can actually articulate a message and they can understand it. I suppose that makes you really smart at the end of the day. So, listen, we're going to bring this into for a landing in a few minutes. Cam, one of the things that you just said really just tweaked something for me. I think for me, from communication, and I think what you just said is so brilliant. For one thing that I think that I learned regarding transferring ideas, because a lot of what I was doing, maybe a little bit different in some of the work that you're doing, although similar. I did a lot of training in foreign countries over the years with government leaders, social leaders, where I ran programs where I provided leadership training, and I really struggled in the beginning to bring connective tissue between some of the things and ideas that I had that I believed were valuable in the culture, but I had problems getting them to stick, getting them to take root. And I learned a valuable lesson, and I shared the story, I think, with you when we were out for lunch. But, while I was traveling a lot and I was struggling with that, I had come home on a trip one time, and I was in Niagara on the Lake, not far from where we live, which, for those of you who don't live in Canada, it's a wine growing area in Canada. I know, surprise, we do have grapes, and we have fruit in Canada in the north. And I was down there and I was at a German winery called Konzelmann's, and I'm always fascinated. I like learning. And I remember talking to one of the guys who was working on the farm as we were out for a tour, and I just sort of said, "Hey, you brought these original vines from Germany. Like, so what do? You bring them over and you just plant them?" And he sort of looked at me and chuckled like, "Ha, you stupid man." And I said, "Well, no, like, tell me how it works." He said, "Well, you can't do that. They won't grow." He said, "You have to graft them onto native roots." So we take native root systems and we graft that fruit, that vine onto it, and that's how we get it to grow. And man, when he said it, it's like a penny dropped. It's just like, boom, I had this like a revelation. I don't know, I can't describe it, but just something clicked. And I thought to myself, that's my problem. I've been trying to take ideas and shove them into the ground in foreign countries, and they kept atrophying and dying. And then I began to realize that I had to attach them to cultural roots. When I attached them to cultural root systems, they began to grow. So I went back with a renewed passion, not to teach, but to learn the cultural roots. The more I became aware of cultural roots, the more I could take ideas and graft them onto them, the more fruit that it bore and the more ultimate effect that we had. And so, again, a lesson I don't think I would have learned if I wasn't doing this, but it was all about that communication thing again. And again, if you're listening, I don't care if you're not out of this country. Organizations have cultural roots, communities, societies, social systems, families, they have cultural root systems. And I think the art of communication and of landing and growing and planting and seeding and germinating ideas is finding cultural root systems to tie those onto, to graft them onto so they can grow, not rejected by the native soil. So that's something that I learned, and it was really powerful. And so I share that with my audience because if you're listening and you're a communicator, maybe sometimes it's not the plant's fault that they're not receiving the message. Maybe you're trying to put it into a soil that's just not going to receive it. So again, lessons that we've learned along the way, Cam, that we wouldn't have necessarily learned. So let me ask you as we finish up. I have two questions as we finish up. One is, so when you look back on your journey over the last, how long now, 30-something years or so?
140 years, yeah.
140 years, yeah. Like a dog.
170 next July.
Yeah, like a dog's life.
Mm-hmm.
What's the one thing that if somebody came to you and said, what's the one experience that was most transformative for you? If you had to pick from all the experiences and you said, hey, here was one of the times that I was absolutely, this was transformative to me. What comes to your mind when I ask you that question that way? An experience you had that you would say, wow, that really transformed something for me. What would you think of when I ask you that kind of question?
So in keeping with the theme of the day, let me give you two. I like to ask people when I'm kind of in some of these challenging contexts, I kind of say, what do you want? What would help you? What do you want to be? What do you want to do? And I find it's a pretty basic question, but it's a profound one. I had a young boy in rural Ghana, and I'm going to be in Ghana in 3 days. But I had a young boy in rural Ghana when I said, what do you want to be when you grow up? He said, a rich white man like you.
Wow.
And on the surface, that's hilarious, right? It's so funny. It's not funny, right? Like that's you can peel back a bunch of layers of that onion. I was with a woman in, I believe it was Tanzania, and I asked her, and she had a granddaughter who was on a 3.5-hour walk to get water so they could boil their beans that night or whatever, and it was a very, very, very difficult context. I said, what do you need? Like, because often I'm in these situations, and when I say, what do you need, the person will say, like, a bag of rice. And for $3 I can send them 10 kilos of rice or whatever, and I often do that while I'm there, knowing that it's not really fixing the problem, it's just maybe providing a bit of relief. But this woman, I said to her, I said, what do you need? And she said, a sewing machine. And that rocked my world. Because she wasn't thinking about what do I need to get through this week. She was thinking about what do I need to be able to provide a sustainable income for my family and build something that can provide kind of an ongoing stream of income that can get me into a better situation. And I'm not sure if that's what you were looking for, Tim, but those two answers have stuck with me, and I carry them with me everywhere I go.
No, and again, I'm not looking for anything other than just trying to figure out what impacts you, because everything impacts us at a different level. And at the end of the day, Cam, let's face it, you and I won the birth lottery, my friend.
No kidding.
I mean, we happen to get our DNA in the right strand. However this thing worked, we won the birth lottery, and I often remind my children of that. We just happen to be born on a part of the planet where we have a subset of power choices that a lot of the world doesn't have. And again, we think that a lot of people, made a choice to be in the situation they're in, and the reality is they lost the lottery, we won the lottery. And at the end of the day, I do think, and I think you would agree, that we do have a social responsibility in the communities that we live in. We are global citizens, and that at the end of the day, the hard part is that we convince ourselves that the little we have to offer is meaningless. And so often we offer none of it. And, what I'm so impressed of in the conversation, just reconnecting with you, Cam, is, I know a little bit about your history. I had the privilege of meeting your parents. They had a positive impact on my life. I shared a little bit with you the last time that we chatted. And, I fundamentally believe that you've become a man that obviously both of your parents were very proud of and are very proud of, although they're not with us anymore, like my parents aren't here anymore. But, you've become a person that has made an impact globally in the world. You have used, you came from a really great family with some means. You could have done 1,000 other things, Cam, all of which were worthy and amazing. But you made a choice to invest, to spend yourself on behalf of others over the years, and that to me is so powerfully transformative. And it encourages me, and I know as we reconnect, and part of this podcast is you and I reconnecting, and hopefully we'll get a chance to do some stuff together, which I think would be awesome over the next period of time. But it's been such a privilege to share this conversation. And again, if you're listening in, I want to challenge you. I don't care if you're going to go to Africa. I don't care if you're going to go next door. It doesn't fucking matter. The question is, are you going to make the place you go better? That's really my challenge to you guys. I don't care where you go. Don't wait to get a plane ticket. Frickin' go next door and make something better, because the world needs people who are going to not just shed the responsibility, judge and blame and all the bullshit that goes with that. And they're going to take responsibility for themselves, and they're also going to fix what they have the power to fix. They're going to catalyze people towards a better outcome, a better destiny. And to me, that's what life is all about. And I know, Cam, for you, that's a big part of what you do. And so as you look at this world in the context of this conversation and the podcast, so when Cam is at his most uncommodified best, when you are doing only what Cam Shapansky can do in a room or with a group of people, what is it that makes you that difference maker? What unique thing do you bring in that moment, Cam, that has just got the Cam stamp on it?
That's a big question.
It is a big question. You know what? I'm going to pour another drink for that answer.
Uh-oh. Yeah, no, I think I've kind of said it, so this is a bit of a summary. But I guess what I would say is there are a lot of people in this. You talked about people of passion in the nonprofit space, and people who are kind of just chasing their purpose and whatever. There are a lot of people in this world who are trying to do things the way things are done. Right? It's just kind of, why am I doing it this way? It's because this is the way you do it, and those ways don't make sense. Right? And so what I kind of bring to the table, I think, is I walk into organizations and I help them see the forest for the trees. Right? It's not about the way things are done. It is, what is your special place and purpose in the world? And then how do we build systems and process around that in order to make that most effective? Many people are searching for, they want to be more innovative. I want to innovate in this space. Come and help me innovate. Come and help me brainstorm. There's too much flippin' innovation in the world. Stop innovating and start executing, right? And so, I think I'm countercultural in many ways, but refreshing in others, right? So, I will sit with boards and executive teams and slap them across the face for trying to come up with the next shiny toy, focus them on innovation, and focus them away from the way things are supposed to be done. No,
you know what? It's a good point. And by the way, when you said what you said, I just thought of IBM had an ad campaign a number of years ago, and it was called Stop Thinking, Start Doing. So I think it's apropos for sure. So listen, as we finish up, if you could challenge our listeners, and again, my listeners come from this swath of people. I have listeners in about 28 countries around the world right now. All different kinds of swaths. I've got professionals. I've got C-level people. I've got moms and dads. I got single parents. I got lots of different. Just a cross section, which I really love. I think because I don't want to really fit in. I don't want to fit in one of those places. I want to be everywhere and nowhere, I suppose. But if you could challenge people based on the context of this conversation with one challenge as we finish up, that you could just stick your finger in their face and press a button in their life and turn something on for them. Cam, what would you want us to challenge them about?
Pause, listen, and simplify. Right. Again, it's nothing new, but I think those are, sit back, don't try to be smart, don't try to be the biggest voice in the room. Deliver a simple message that people can understand and stick with it.
Excellent. That is, by the way, simple and profound. The definition of profound, I think, simply profound. I'll take that one. Listen, as we finish up, thanks again for your time and listening in today. I really appreciate you listening in. Do us a favor. As you take this conversation and mull it over and chew it on, maybe you sit down with a drink like we did and you ask yourself, what does this mean to me? Do me a favor, please do that, because if not, you've just wasted your time if you listen to us. You absolutely just wasted your time, precious finite resource. You're not getting any of it back. So do me a favor, make it count. Ruminate on this conversation and ask yourself that question. How do you simplify? How do you clarify? How do you move with passion? How do you articulate what you want to do? How do you catalyze yourself and others towards cause? And as you do us a favor. Email me at tim@theuncommodified.com or check me out on social media, connect with me, and let Cam and I know how you're uncorking this, like we did with these drinks, how you're uncorking it, how you're pouring it out, drinking it in, allowing it to bring some effect in your life. And do me a favor, as you do, stand out for all the right reasons in a very crowded world. That's what uncommodifying is all about. Have an excellent day. Thanks for your time.